And so, in 1986, I suddenly had a thought. Ever since I was in school, I was always bothered by one curious fact. We all were raised with an understanding of the essential concomitants of life: nutrition, irritability, respiration, excretion, reproduction, sensitive, all that kind of stuff. We all remember that from school. And I was always perplexed by the fact that the word excretion was hardly ever mentioned in the textbooks of biology when they dealt with plants. Indeed, if you take a plant physiology textbook from the shelf to this day and look through the index for the word excretion, in almost every book the word is missing. And it suddenly occurred to me, we need to have an excretory mechanism for plants. This surely must be why it is they're shedding their leaves. The leaf is not merely the laminar organ that we've all been told about. It is not simply the organ by which the plant captures solar energy. Yes, that's its function during the summertime. But in the autumn, I suddenly felt, in the autumn, the leaf has a secondary function that others had missed. The leaf becomes the excretory organ of the plant. That explains why it is that every plant, even if it isn't stressed, if it isn't short of water, if it's got all the nutriment any plant in heaven could ever wish for, but they still always have brown leaves that drop off. When the plant is shedding its leaves, it's having a crap. And the plant has got to do so. It is a living organism. By definition, it must excrete. And we cannot anymore turn our backs on the fact that the mechanism of plant excretion has never actually been looked at closely, and all the time, leaf fall offers us the perfect model. So I gave my lecture in Chicago in 1986. The title was A Physiological Purpose for Abscission. And I argued in that lecture that that explains why it is that all plants, everywhere you look, drop bits off them. Later that year, in October, I published it in Nature and concluded that the yellowed leaf becomes an excretophore, and the shedding of the leaf may be seen as the plant's excretory mechanism. I like the word excretophore, a bearer of an excretory product. I mean, one couldn't really say the plant is having a crap in a paper for Nature, although there is no other way of summing it up in an immediately colloquial and understandable form. So I then published it as a general theory of excretion in higher plants, and the paper set out the fact that plants seem to have this extraordinary mechanism. And it was reported in the press at the time. And shortly afterwards, I went to meet Fred Adicott at Irvine, California. Marvellous man. He and his wife were a great pair. She did all the microscopic drawings for him and all the calculations. And Fred had written this wonderful book that listed all the reasons why plants drop their leaves, but never quite that one. And Fred said to me, I only wish you'd published that a couple of years ago, then we could have put it in the book. It is the one thing that actually holds it all together and makes sense. I'm very sad Fred isn't with us. He was a great inspiration. And so, of course, it began to attract attention on the web. A chunk of my book was picked out and cited in this site. And yet, I mean, people often turn to Wikipedia, but it's remarkable what a load of rubbish there is in Wikipedia. I mean, people who write on the web, bloggers and contributors to Wikipedia, often say to me, the great thing about the web is that it allows you to publish stuff without editors getting in the way. And I can tell them, having been an author all my adult life, that the main purpose of an editor is to stop you publishing drivel. And if you don't have an editor, then drivel is what may well be published. And this article in Wikipedia on excretion describes it all as though it is basically an animal phenomenon, and adds a bit to say that plants eliminate gases through the stomata, and animals have special excretory organs. Elsewhere in Wikipedia, my attention was drawn to an article on metabolic waste, unlinked to the one on excretion, you notice, which does argue that the abscissa in leaves can carry wastes away from the parent plant. And I'd argued that the leaf acts as an excretory. Now, damn it, I argued in black and white that it acted as an excretophore. All this chap has to do is to copy down the letters from a publication and type them on his little computer. And they can't even get that right, ladies and gentlemen. Don't ever believe anything that you read in Wikipedia. If you look up excretion now on the web, and you can see that this concept, after a quarter of a century, is beginning to wander through the system. Plants translocate wastes into their leaves, which are then shed. The Journal of Experimental Biology says they can also be considered as a plant excretion mechanism. And that's a reasonable summary of my views. Turn to plant physiology, and you find that the hypothesis is cited there that anthocyanins accumulating in the leaf may represent an excretion process. But these authors don't actually agree that that is necessarily the case. They think there may be another purpose. And they conclude that the build-up of the anthocyanins in autumn leaves, those are the red colours, contributes to the shielding of leaf chloroplasts from excess sunlight during senescence. Now, that cannot possibly be the case, mainly because the vast majority of plants do not have any anthocyanin building up in their leaves before they are shed, but mainly because in autumn you don't have a problem with high light levels. You have a lot of high levels of sunlight in the spring when plants are growing. That's when they would need the anthocyanin. But by the time the autumn leaves are being shed, you're past the equinox, and the levels of sunlight are far too low to require any shielding of the chlorophyll, which is in any event being withdrawn from the leaf. The whole view makes no sense at all. So let us take a look at a rose plant in the garden in the spring. Many of you may have noticed this, that as these young twigs germinate and these soft, fresh, unhardened branches of the rose emerge, they are tinted with red. I'm sure many of you have seen that. The red is anthocyanin, and the anthocyanin is present in the cells in order to do exactly as those authors suggested, in order to militate against the excessive levels of sunlight that might otherwise damage the newly growing and expanding cells. So that's where anthocyanin actually does have a sort of anti-sunlight effect, but it can't possibly be said to be necessary to protect the leaves in the autumn. That's not where it would work. Anthocyanins, here's a group of them, are phenolic compounds. If they had the quinoidal base, they are a bluer colour, but most of them are reds and oranges. They are phenols, as you can see. Each one is made up of these 3 benzene rings. And phenols, of course, are toxic, and it may be that in some way they are removed and deposited in the leaf as a way of detoxifying an otherwise irritating or unwanted metabolic build-up inside the plant leaf. I don't know. We need to look further into it. And yet anthocyanins have almost been evolved to benefit us. I mean, it cannot possibly be that plants thought of all of this when they decided to synthesize anthocyanins. But anthocyanins in our diet produce the most wonderful range of beneficial effects. They help to optimize vision. They're very good for the retina. They help to promote the circulation of the blood. They work against hypertension, high blood pressure. They work against hyperlipidemia, like hypercholesterolemia, when people have higher levels of normal circulating fat in the blood or higher levels of high-density cholesterol, high-density lipoproteins. Those levels are reduced by anthocyanins in the diet. They improve the function of the heart. They help the liver to recover from injury. They have both anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial effects and help to keep the body free of inflammation and bacterial infections. They inhibit mutations. They actually work as powerful antioxidants to stop mutations from resulting from the presence of mutagens in the environment of cells. And they scavenge free radicals. They are extremely useful in the diet of mammals. In fact, I dare say that a stew of autumn leaves would do all of you the power of good. They also accumulate heavy metals. The leaves of trees will build up levels of heavy metals. I mean, here is the world's leading journal, Trees. I must say I'm not greatly impressed by their editorial skills, since they talk of He rather than heavy metals. But nonetheless, they show how in the beech the levels of heavy metals increase when the leaves are going to be shed. Cadmium is often detected in the leaves of plants. Very often, heavy metals in the soil end up in foliage. Here is a paper on the accumulation in tree leaves from urban areas of heavy metals. A nice example here from a nickel-copper smelter in northwestern Russia, showing how heavy metals accumulate in the leaves. And here the coconut palm, in exactly the same way. This is a complex table, but I want to direct your attention just to one small fact. Here we've got Holotelia, this is the Indian elm, cassia, which of course is a medicinal plant, and neem, which is a kind of Indian mahogany. All of these plants are of medicinal importance in traditional Ayurvedic Indian medicine, and yet they all accumulate levels of heavy metals. And just look, on the dump, the chemical dump where these plants were grown, 1,700 parts per million in the leaf, 26 by the time the leaves have been shed. If you look down here, 1199, 2852. 726 parts per million increases to 2,500 parts per million. In fact, just as metabolic wastes are pumped into the leaf, so the heavy metals are actually specifically expelled from the plant and put into the leaf before the leaf is shed in leaf